This is the story on how I sacrificed everything to go all in on what I love. And the wild part is the first time that I went for it, it came crashing down in a way that made everyone around me feel justified for saying, "See, told you so." It also taught me something that I wish I knew way earlier. Let me take you back. Before I ever cared about money and careers or, being normal, I knew one thing, and I cared about racing way more than the people around me. When I was a kid, we lived in 108 Mile House, BC. That was the town we lived in. And my parents just bought a Polaris dealership in Williams Lake. It was about an hour away from where we lived. So they were commuting every day. And my brother and I were in school, and we'd just walk home down the power lines like it was normal. And back then, the kids at my school thought racing was the coolest thing in the world. And in a small town, if you race, you're basically a little local celebrity. Then our house went up for sale because we were moving to Williams Lake, and we had this massive German Shepherd named King. And he was that kind of dog that would pick up a fence post and treat it like it was a stick. With strangers coming by the house constantly, he started to get a little bit edgy. So one night, my mom and I were outside throwing a ball, and she said, "All right, Aaron, it's time to go inside." And I said, "Of course, one more throw." And King does what he always does. He brings the ball back and then snatches it and takes off like he wants you to chase him. So I did, and I tackled him, just like I've done 100 times, but something flipped. And the next thing you know, he's on top of me, and my entire right side of my face is in his mouth, and he's shaking me like he's trying to kill me. And my mom is trying to pull him off me and hitting him, yelling and doing everything that she can. And she finally grabs me by the ankles and pulls me out by my feet. And I just remember bleeding everywhere. And the weird part is I wasn't even crying because I was strictly just in shock. And my mom, she calls my dad. She's trying to stay calm but loud. And she goes, "Brent, grab a towel, please. Aaron has been bit by the dog." My dad walks in thinking it's just like a nip. Then he sees my face and his face goes white. So straight to the hospital we go. The doctors called in and they tell me that they can freeze my face, but it would make the scars worse later. So they decided to stitch it without freezing. And I'll never forget the doctor. He says, "Maybe it's time to get rid of the dog." And I'm sitting there starting to cry now because I got a half-stitched face going on. And I'm like, "Yeah, maybe it's time to get a Chihuahua." The doctor starts laughing and he goes, "Hey, careful," making me laugh because I'm trying to keep these stitches, looking good. Now, within weeks of that moment, we sell the house and I end up in 3 different schools within a few months. I show up at this new school with stitches and swelling, and within days, my nickname became Frankenstein. And as a 7-year-old kid, that obviously hits different. At some point in those months, I made a quiet decision and I stopped trying to make friends and I just started focusing on riding. When you're on a dirt bike or on a snowmobile, you just put your helmet on and nobody sees your scars, right? They just see you. That was the first time that I really remember thinking okay, I might be wired different than the people around me. And it didn't stop there. There were weeks where I'd only be in school for classes for, 3 days because we'd be traveling to and from the races. And I remember a teacher telling me, "Aaron, you need to be here every day just like the other kids if you want to live a proper life as you get older." And then came a parent-teacher meeting and they cornered my dad, trying to guilt him because they had to plan homework around our travel. And my dad, I remember, just looks at them and he goes, "Is he failing his classes?" And they say no. He goes, "Is he not getting his homework done?" And they say no. He says, "Are you saying it's not your job to teach my son?" And I just remember the silence because they had nothing to say. Then what my dad did is he turned that conversation into a standard for me. And he goes, "If you get anything less than a B grade in school, racing stops until you fix it." So for me, now it's not just a passion, right? It's pressure added, and it started to form real discipline. Fast forward to adulthood, and this all happens again. And I told my family I was about to risk the safe path I was on to chase a life that actually felt like mine. And at this time, it was 2016, and I was a fully ticketed electrician, and I was making great money. I had a stable career, but racing was still the thing that I couldn't let go of. So I tell my family, I'm going all in on a marketing business. I'm going to build it around snowmobiling so I can get back to the lifestyle that I actually want. And they think that I've completely lost my mind. They couldn't understand why I'd risk a safe career, a real career for some, online thing. And my dad's listening to me and I'm trying to explain it to him. And he just goes, listen, we love you. We don't agree with you doing this, but we're here for you whenever you need us. And always know you can always go back to being an electrician at any time. And I could hear the disappointment in his voice, not because, he didn't love me, but because he genuinely thought that I was about to blow up my life. It was then that came the point of no return. I needed 14 grand to hire this mentor to learn this stuff online. I sold a project vehicle I had in the garage. I sold my snowmobile trailer. I went through all of my stuff and just started listing anything and everything that I think I could sell. And I just remember thinking, I'm going to make a short-term sacrifice here for a long-term gain. Then I wired $14,000 to a mentor that I had never met before who was living in Mexico at the time. I'm sure you agree, this is the kind of moment where you're either admitting you're full of shit or you become the person that you keep claiming you are. At first, it looked like they were right. That first little win hit, and it proved that it wasn't just a fantasy. The first month I started advertising my business. I'm doing everything I thought I should be doing. I was doing these daily actions, I had these checklists, I was posting content, I was learning, and it just feels like nothing's really working. And so I get into a call with this mentor that I just paid, and I'm honestly ready to rip him apart because I was starting to lose belief that this was actually gonna work. So I'm like, hey man, I'm doing everything you told me to do, but I'm not seeing these results. And he, walks me through the checklist, and then he gets to the end of it and he goes, okay, are you reading this book every day? He holds up a book and it's called The Magic. And I'm like, no, dude, why would I read a book that has nothing to do with business? How does this make any sense? Because it's practically what it is it's a daily gratitude practice. And I'm thinking, okay, this is just a bunch of woo-woo of, think positive things and positive things will happen crap. I'm thinking that's the angle he's going to play here. And he just looks at me and he goes, you want the results that I'm getting, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, that's why I hired you in the first place. And then he goes, then pick up the book and read it. And then he ended the call. And I just remember being so mad that I thought about it for a moment. I thought about letting go and giving up. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to commit to reading this book out of pure spite. I'm going to read this harder than anyone has ever read anything. Within a week, I make my first sale. It pays me $300 in commission. I remember going into the bank, withdrawing the cash and just holding it in my hands like it was proof, that the universe wasn't lying. And not because $300 changed my life, but it's because it proved that this machine that I was building actually worked. 53 days in from advertising with my business, I earned just over $10,000 in commissions. I have this thought. If I can do this working 1 hour in the morning and a few hours after work every day, what really happens if I go all in with this? And that's when I put in my 2 weeks notice, left my electrical career. And I know it looks insane from the outside, but in my head, it finally felt like I had my way back to riding my snowmobile for a living. But before any of that stuff, the first time it really came crashing down and proved the doubters right, it wasn't in my business. It was actually in racing when everything got taken away from me. You see, I was 17 years old and I was just finishing school, and racing was my entire identity. Then what ended up happening was the injuries, they started stacking up. There was back-to-back seasons of being in the ICU, hospital level stuff. And then the last straw, it wasn't even my crash. It was my brother. He qualified for the X Games, and he has a crash that shatters his femur so badly that they almost amputated his leg. At that point, that was it for my parents. And they sat us down and they say, hey, we're stopping racing. We're selling the business. We would rather have you guys alive than racing. And in one sentence, my dream just gets shut off. That's the moment where every voice that ever doubted my path suddenly just becomes louder. And when the racing got shut off, it wasn't just, losing a sport for me. I mean, it felt like I lost my identity and having to try to pretend that I was just okay with it. And after that, life just got numbed. Everything became focused on my brother's recovery and also doing what we had to do in the business every day after school to get it ready for sale. I remember just being in the shop, just keeping things running, helping customers, going through the motions. And I'm just quietly carrying this feeling like, hey, maybe everybody was right. I go to my school counselor. I enroll into an after-school program to become an initial attack forest firefighter, okay? Honestly, doing this, it just felt like I was starting over. It felt like this was what everyone was saying to me before about trying to build the proper life. The hardest moments were never in class, right? They were in the dealership, surrounded by the sport that I love, realizing it wasn't mine anymore. And then comes this one moment that still kind of sticks in my throat. And, the shop, it sells. And all of our trophies are lined across the showroom. And the new owner looks at them and he says he doesn't want them there. So we start packing them up, trophy after trophy. And I start ripping off the plaques from the ones that mattered to me most and, kept the ones that, really impacted me the most. And then I took the rest and I just threw them in a box, And not because it was, we needed the trophies. It was just because those plaques really proved like I used to be someone. So when we're done ripping off these plaques, we took those trophies and we walked them into a promotional shop and we handed all of these trophies over to them for free. And, because we had so many of them that there was literally full sets from over the years. And just doing that, it just felt like I handed over my identity in 15 boxes. I did what a lot of guys do, and I tried to outrun that feeling with work, money, distractions, anything that really kept me from thinking. I thought firefighting was going to be the plan, and ended up that season wasn't good for work. So I went into oil and gas, and I got on with a drilling rig in northern Canada. I'd go into the gym for 2 hours a day. I was just grinding away, just focusing on making money and just telling myself, if I stack enough cash, I'll fund my racing on my own and get back into it without anybody's help. I was so focused on that grind that I did a shift where I spent 113 days in camp in this horrible place called Zama City in Alberta. Definitely not glamorous at all. It was just basically work, sleep, repeat. And then I'd come home with money and just try to fill that hole, right? I'd buy vehicles, travel to Vegas, party, video games, anything that just helped me avoid the thought of, I don't even recognize myself anymore. And how that version of me that I liked was gone. But eventually you can't outrun it anymore. My real rock bottom, it wasn't being broke. It was realizing I looked successful on paper, but I still felt empty on the inside. And that's when I finally admitted something to myself. And oil and gas, it just wasn't giving me the freedom, right? It was trapping me. You work the most in the winter when the ground is frozen, which obviously is the best time to be riding a snowmobile. So I made a move that felt smart at the time, and I went back to school. I got my ticket as an electrician, thinking that this is going to give me more flexibility. Then I ended up as a foreman on a big power plant build in Merritt, BC. At this point, I'm making the most money I've ever made. I own a snowmobile. I have the dirt bike and have all of those things. On paper, it looks like I won, but again, I still don't have the time. I just can't take off when the snow is perfect. I can't just disappear when a storm rolls in. And then one night, again, I walk into this rental basement suite that I was living in for work. I'm still in my work clothes, and I close the door and it's just silence. And I walk over to the living room and I just drop myself on this old dusty couch. And in that moment, it just felt like my soul left my body and it just kept falling. And I remember thinking what am I doing with my life? I'm 28 years old. I keep telling people I'm an athlete. I'm acting like I'm going to go race again, but I'm not actually doing it. And then it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Not because I was failing, but because I was succeeding at a life that I didn't want. That's when something tiny happened that literally changed everything. It wasn't some miracle, but it was just a moment that made me think like, hey, what if there is a way back to focus on what I love doing? I grab my phone, I start scrolling Facebook, and I see an ad. And it's this bald guy standing in Costa Rica talking about how he used to be an electrician and that he learned this skill that he calls freelance digital marketing. And he's bragging about this laptop lifestyle and how he's traveling everywhere and how he advertises for businesses and earns a commission from it. And my first thought is like, yeah, this is probably a scam. Then I had this second thought that I just really couldn't shake. And I thought like, I don't care about travel, but what if I could build a marketing business around snowmobiling? Like, what if I could create content around the lifestyle that I've been craving for years and actually make it pay? I started digging deeper. I was being skeptical the whole time, just trying to prove that it wasn't real, but also thinking like, if I don't at least look into this and it does turn out to be real, like I'm gonna regret this for the rest of my life. This is where my mindset actually shifted. I stopped trying to prove to everyone and even to myself that I was still a professional snowmobiler and how I was going to make it my career again by saying it out loud. And I just started focusing on actually doing it. I learned every day. I read anything that I could to help with my mindset or to help with discipline and just, rewiring how I think. I found rooms that I could get into where the smart people were in this marketing world. And instead of like begging for attention from those experts that I wanted to learn from, I'd look at finding ways to help them. Because, when you help the right people, you get close to the knowledge that you want. That's what became my new identity. Not I'm a pro athlete, not, I'm going to do it. Just simply a commitment to I am doing it. And then the receipts started showing up. And slowly the same people who thought I was crazy had to admit that this thing was real. At first, my family, they still thought that I lost it, but I started traveling to events and I'd be gone for, weeks at a time. And because I was gone, I needed a way for money to actually get into my account. So I set my parents' mailing address to where my checks would get sent. And I would ask my dad to deposit them when they arrived. That's when the tone changed because not that I convinced him, but because reality did. My brother went from being my biggest hater, thinking that I just went completely crazy, to then working with me, learning the game, surrounding himself with the same people. And now he runs a multi-million-dollar online company, managing sales teams in fintech. My old friends back in my small town, some of them, they talk trash. I'm sure some of them still do. They said I must be doing something illegal because they couldn't understand how it could actually work. So I just did the healthiest thing that I could have done. And I just removed myself from that circle and I moved to a new city. I put myself around people who didn't hate when you win. So if you're watching this with people in your life waiting for you to fail, I need you to hear this part. If you have people in your life that aren't supportive of your sport, your passion, your dream, I want you to stop focusing on how loud their doubt for you is and start focusing on what it will cost you if you quit. The cost that I paid, it was 12 years. 12 years of this quiet depression, really. It was 12 years of thinking this was it for me. I was going to work a job surrounded by negative people every day for the rest of my life until I retired. And if I got lucky, maybe ride once or twice a year on my days off if they lined up with a good snow weekend. It cost me 12 years of my life. Here's what I wish I knew when that doubt towards me was the loudest. If you're not spending time doing what you love, you're going to build a life that you hate. And you don't need everyone to understand it. You just need to make it a priority in a way that fits your life so you don't wake up one day realizing you traded your whole identity for other people's comfort. Now, if you want the full story on how I became a pro snowmobiler and the exact moment it all got taken away, that's the next video here. So go watch it right after this because it explains everything that this video couldn't. And I just want to say, like, thank you for watching. And I hope this inspires even just one person to go all in on that thing that they've been holding back on. Peace.